Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessings be with you all. Welcome to today's sohbet on this Tuesday, the 19th of August 2025. I hope you are well wherever you are tuning into this from. Today, I would like to read a couple of verses in the Holy Qur'an that I was reflecting upon and share with you some thoughts. The verses are in Surah 45, al-Jathiyah, also translated as the kneeling. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And it's verse 23 and 24. Have you seen the one who takes his desire as his God, whom Allah has held astray despite his knowledge, set a seal upon his hearing and his heart, and put a covering upon his eyes? Who then can guide him after Allah? Will you not then be mindful of advice? They say, there is nothing but our life in this world. We die, we live, and nothing destroys us except the passage of time. But they have no knowledge in support of this assumption. They only speculate. Now, these are very interesting thoughts that are in this verse. Sometimes people, they just look at a cursory glance at this and like a person who interviewed me, they see these sort of verses as being sort of antagonistic to people or against freedom or things like this. But from my perspective, this is quite a misunderstanding of what the verses are trying to convey. So I'll just go through it piece by piece. Have you seen the one who takes his desire as his God? That's the first part of the verse. Think about that. A person whose God is their desire. That means that above anything else, their desires control them. Without any other consideration, without any other kind of reference to a higher power or higher authority or people's feelings. Now, maybe if a person has good desires, it won't turn out too bad. Some people are very kindly and just naturally decent. But if their desires are very greedy, materialistic, cruel, how will that turn out? This is why it is mentioned here in this verse. The person who takes their desire as their God. They might not call it a God. It just means that that is the thing above all else that they are giving a preference to, that they are following. They're not listening to anybody else. And this becomes even more clear when we read the last part of the verse. And then the verse continues, whom Allah has held astray despite his knowledge. In other words, some of these people, they can be very knowledgeable. And in this, there is also a danger of knowledge. Although generally speaking, the Quran, from the very first revelation to the Prophet Muhammad, Iqra, is encouraging people to read, to learn, to recite what they've learned. But at the same time, here, the Quran is also cautioning that knowledge, if it is married with desire, and there is not humility there, there's not understanding there, that knowledge can actually lead a person to become even more proud and even more arrogant. And I think every single one of us must have seen people like this, who are in positions of power, authority through academia. And I work at a university. So I'm not knocking universities here. They're very, very important. But there is a danger that when people, they become very learned, that they can only be listening to themselves instead of others. This happened with the famous scientist, Albert Einstein, who, when he brought forward his new theory of relativity and the expanding universe, it was rejected. It was rejected by the scientists of the day because they all thought that they knew better than Einstein. As it turns out, Einstein understood things better than them. And eventually his theories were accepted as the normal ones, as the ones that are more satisfactorily explaining things. But this was out of intellectual arrogance on the part of those other scientists. They'd learned things and married with their desire, married with their pride and their position, they wouldn't budge. Whereas learning is an ongoing process. It's like this cup. This cup is full of tea. If this cup is full, I cannot fill it with anything else. First, I have to empty the cup. If I empty the cup, I can add something to it. Similarly, with learning, we have to be open to learning new things. And that doesn't mean we reject everything we already understand, but we are open to reflecting and learning and to see if what we already understand is correct or not, and having the humility to approach that. And this is why Allah continues and says, set a seal upon their hearing, their heart, and put a covering upon their eyes. Because this is the consequence when a person becomes arrogant with their knowledge and they are not listening, they're not appreciating other points of view, they're not open to learning. So it is as if there is a seal upon their eyes and their hearing and their heart because they're not open to anything. And so warning here is, in order for us to learn and to develop ourselves, we need to be open to learning. We need to understand that not one of us understands everything. We're always learning. It's an ongoing process. And that's why the verse finishes off with, who then can guide him after Allah? You know, Allah sends inspiration. Allah sends revelation. Revelation in books, inspiration to hearts and minds. But if a person is ignoring all of that, then who can guide the person? And then ends with a question, will you not then be mindful of advice? And this goes back to the first part of the verse. It rounds it off very nicely, because what was the first part of the verse? Have you seen the one who takes his desire as his God, whom Allah has held astray despite his knowledge? And ends with, will you not then be mindful of advice? The solution to this problem of someone who is only listening to themselves and not listening to anyone else and not learning is to be mindful of advice, to listen more than we speak. It's said, you know, if you want to be a good communication person, good at communications, yeah, whether that is in conversation or in interviews and anything like that, that you should listen 70% of the time and talk 30% of the time. And this is connected to this wisdom here about being mindful of advice. The next verse then says, they say, there is nothing but our life in this world. We die, we live, and nothing destroys us except the passage of time. Again, this is connected to that first verse about people who are arrogant in their knowledge, following their own desires, assuming there is nothing except the life in this world. Who of us knows that? I mean, those of us who are working on revelation or have inspirations may sense there is something more. But I'm talking purely on the knowledge available in this world, purely on our experience, what is tangible. Who of us can say absolutely that there is nothing except this life. It's a very arrogant position to take. You can say you think that, but to say definitely, and that is it, that's the final word on it, that's arrogant. And when it is based on nothing, even if we reflect upon the natural order of things in this world, there is a time when things are born, there is a time when they die, but also something continues on. Our genes get passed on to the next generation. Our thoughts get passed on to the next generation. Memes get passed on, not just genes. Something of us will remain in this world, even after we die. And depending on what we do with our life, that could be a little or a lot. It could be seen as good and inspirational for others, or was bad and something that people wish they'd never known and want to forget or remember for the wrong reasons. So we have to be very careful of this. It says here, these people say that we die, we live, and nothing destroys us except the passage of time. Well, again, this is an assumption. An earthquake could happen, which causes, all sorts of problems, and, our house could fall upon us, or, there could be a volcano that erupts, a meteorite could hit us, we could get run over by a car or a bus, or be involved in an aeroplane crash. None of these are just because of the passage of time. And this is why Allah is saying, but they have no knowledge in support of this assumption. Even in terms of this worldly life, they are wrong. But there is something within each one of us which, when that came into this physical body, gave us life. When that leaves this physical body, this body is no longer alive. It is dead. That is the soul. That soul energy and spirit that each one of us has was here before this body was born and will persist after this body dies. That soul continues its journey. And depending upon what we've learned in this life, how we've lived this life, will depend upon whether we have passed the examination of this life, or whether we still have more to learn. I think all of us will have something to learn, especially in this time. But whether we've at least passed the main examinations. Because each one of our lives will be examined. And many will be found wanting. Don't assume that that is all imagination. May, by the grace of Allah, we all pass that examination and meet in the hereafter in a good way. But let's reflect upon Allah's revelations in the Quran and see the wisdom in them. I hope through going through just those couple of verses there, you can see how there is much that we often miss when we just recite the verses in Arabic, especially when Arabic isn't our first language, or even if it is our first language, but we do not understand classical Arabic so well, or especially if our native tongue is English or Urdu or some other language. So it's important to go through these verses and try to understand what they're really telling us, for there is much wisdom that is often missed. May Allah bless you all, and I hope if you're in the UK, you will have a very good evening, and wherever you are, have a very good week. Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all.